The first time I killed 100 plants in a single day, I was devastated. It was very difficult to take, but I learned from it. By the time I was killing 1,000 plants in a single day, it was no big deal. It was normal gardening activity, but I still turned it into an educational opportunity. Join me today as I discuss killing plants, the good points and the bad. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I kill plants. In fact, like every gardener, killing plants is part of my normal gardening activity. The important thing to recognize is whether you're killing the plants on purpose or by accident, and learning the difference, and then also learning what to do about it. In this area of my vegetable garden, at the end of the last growing season, I intentionally killed a lot of plants, productive plants. But in this bed, I did everything I could to keep the plants alive. It was the end of the season, and here in Colorado, a frost was coming. I couldn't protect everything, but I could protect the plants in this bed, my peppers that were very close to becoming fully ripe. So in this bed, I covered it with plastic to maintain a higher heat level that would keep the plants alive during the frost. Because I didn't cover the rest of the beds, they were affected by the frost and they died. Decisions like that are common for gardeners like me in very cold regions. Every year as the frost approaches, we have to decide which plants are going to die and which ones we're going to make that extra effort for to try to prolong the season. But eventually the season is going to be over and all of those summer plants that we're growing will die. That's okay. That is a normal part of gardening. Right now in my Colorado garden, it's actually 6 degrees Fahrenheit. It's cold. Last night it got down to -5 degrees Fahrenheit, even colder. A lot of the plants in my landscape are just fine because I have selected plants that can handle my severe cold, my 5B hardiness zone type of cold. But if I were to grow plants that can't handle that cold, a day like today would be enough to kill them. And that's a very common mistake that many gardeners make, is to put plants in their landscape that can't handle the winters. They won't go dormant, they'll die. And to make matters worse, you go to your big box store, to the garden center, and they'll often sell you plants that won't survive your winter with no notification to you. So you put a nice, pretty perennial or a tree in your landscape, and it's going to die. Learning what can survive your winters is extremely important. I know I can survive my winters, but standing out in 6-degree weather is just a little extreme. So to extend my ability to finish this video, I'm going inside. Oh, this is so much better, so much warmer. Now, when I say that I've killed 10,000 plants, in full honesty, that's an underestimation. I know I've killed many more than that. And it's in a place like this, my seed starting area. This is where I, and I think most gardeners, actually do most of their plant killing. When I learned about hardiness zones, I stopped buying the plants that didn't match Zone 5. I no longer bought the Zone 7 and the Zone 8 plants to put in my landscape, and I no longer killed plants. And when it comes to season extending, yes, every year hundreds of my plants in the garden die, but it's almost a natural death. It's an expected death. But here in the seed starting area, this is where things have often gone wrong. and been quite painful. And a lot of it has to do with a tray like this. This is a 72 cell tray for starting seeds. I take my soil, fill the tray, take my seeds, and plan to grow seedlings. But there's so much that can go wrong. The first time that I lost an entire tray, that's what I was talking about when I said I was devastated, because I'd gone to all that effort years ago to grow the seedlings, and then something happened and they died. And it was that something that really motivated me to learn more about seedlings. At the time, I think the biggest culprit was probably that I overwatered them. I drowned them and they died. Since then, I've had the opposite problem. Not that long ago, I had a tray like this with pepper seedlings, actually 2 trays. And I had them on heat mats because the peppers can benefit from a warmer soil temperature. And I was watering them every single day, and they were doing great. And they were probably 1.5 inches tall, getting to the point where I was thinking about transplanting them to bigger pots. And there was a day, I can remember being upstairs, I was busy doing other activities, and I forgot to come down and water those seedlings. And at the time, late in the evening, when I thought about it, I thought they'll be okay until the morning. I came back the next morning and all of the seedlings were dead. Just one day without water was enough to dry out the soil mix and kill all the plants on a single day. And I'd been gardening for a while, and it was extremely painful for that event to happen. Just last year, I took a trip during the critical seedling phase, and I had a house sitter who was going to take care of my plants and water them. I had everything set up with automatic timers on my lights. The heat mats I had removed so they wouldn't get overheated. I wasn't that concerned till I came back and found out that the power strip that I had the lights plugged into had failed. So for more than a week, those plants received no light at all. They got spindly, they were white, they were not strong. I tried to save them, but they were just too far gone. One of the things that causes the body count to increase every year is a way that many of us still garden. When we take our tray and we start our seeds, instead of putting 1 seed per cell, we'll put 2 or sometimes 3. Usually because we're concerned about germination. Sometimes because we're trying to maximize the space that we're growing in to have multiple plants. Well, I grow a lot of plants, but not that many plants. So if I put 2 seeds in each of these cells and I have a cell of tomato plants, then that means I have about 140 or more tomato seedlings growing in this tray. That's too many. So every year when I do that, at some point I have to come in and pull out about half of those tomato seedlings. So a tray like this every year leads to the death of 50 to 75 seedlings that I could avoid if I just did a single seed in each of these cells. When you multiply that by multiple trays, you can see how a typical gardener in just one seed starting season will intentionally kill hundreds of plants. When I talk about the day I killed 1,000 plants, that was still at the seedling stage. Now, they weren't in trays. This is when we had the big 42-foot dome greenhouse at the Galileo Garden, and we're growing in long beds. I was teaching students about seeds and seedlings and the process of gardening. And so over the course of a week, every time a class came out, I had them sow carrot seeds in one of our very long beds. And I think there were 4 or 5 classes with 20 students in each class, and each student had a handful of carrot seeds that they spread throughout the bed. It was a great opportunity to teach about sowing seeds. Well, what happened when all those seeds germinated and began growing? I had thousands and thousands of little carrot seedlings growing on top of each other, side by side, just filling the bed. So the next part of the education was thinning out the plants, pricking out those little carrot seedlings and choosing which ones survived and got to stay in the ground and grow bigger. Over the course of 3 days, a number of my volunteers and I were thinning out that carrot bed. I think it would be a close estimation of maybe 5,000 carrot seedlings were plucked out. They were killed by us, but it was to allow some of the remaining carrots, hundreds of them, to survive and do much better because they had more room and they weren't being crowded by all of their brethren. Often we are directed by others to intentionally kill our plants. As I look at this packet of Butter Crunch lettuce, when I'm sowing outdoors, it tells me to sow 1 seed for every inch. But then, once I have 2 to 3 sets of true leaves, I'm going to thin out the plants to a final spacing of 10 to 16 inches between the plants. Think about all those seedlings in between that were forced to lose their life just to allow 2 to grow. That might have made sense if we were expecting terrible germination, but these seeds have good germination. So every year we follow the directions on seed packets like this, and every year we're killing hundreds of plants. It's still painful for me, even when it's a necessary part of gardening, to kill plants. So if the final spacing is 10 to 16 inches, I'm not going to sow every single inch. I might sow every 4 inches, or I might sow every 6 inches. But the idea is for that initial sowing to give myself a little bit more space between the seedlings so that I don't have to kill so many. As I've killed these thousands and thousands of plants over the years, it's driven me to try to come up with alternative methods and better ways of gardening so that I no longer overwater my seedlings, or adjusting the spacing of my plants, using season extension outside, choosing the kind of plants that fit my hardiness zone. These are all the kind of mistakes, some of them intentional, that we make that lead us to that point of making the good decisions in how we're going to garden. So even though the seed packet tells me to sow the seeds 1 inch apart, I don't have to do it. I can choose what I'm going to do so that I don't have to kill so many plants. As you garden, as you make these mistakes, as you kill your plants, either by accident or on purpose, learn something from it and use those lessons to continue your gardening journey in a positive way, in a way that doesn't make you feel bad because you have to thin out so many plants, or because you weren't ready for the cold weather that came, or whatever situation develops. And that's a better way to feel good when you come to gardening. And for me, that's what it's all about. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.